Oh, we might be saved by like the most unexpected group of people. Do you know who Trump's trying to declare war on? The cartel. Oh, please do. Please do. Find out, Trump.
Anyways, today we saw the first documented case of Trump utilizing military force to conduct a direct strike against the Latin American drug cartels, that particularly here being Tren de Aragua out of Venezuela. And it's worth remembering this was a core campaign promise of Trump back in the 2024 election, which is that, first of all, he's going to treat and designate the drug cartels as the foreign terrorist organizations that they actually are. Okay, these people kill way more Americans on a yearly basis than Al-Qaeda, ISIS, or any of these other groups around the world ever did, first of all. But secondly, that obviously entails utilizing military force to secure our borders and protect Americans from the actual and direct threat to our homeland that it would seem nobody really wants to care or talk about. But now that Trump is indeed ramping up those military operations against the cartel, you already know what is coming, which is the reaction from liberals, Democrats, and also some of these so-called national security advisors, people who come from the political establishment of the Pentagon, the Department of State, etc., who are saying, no, this is a really bad idea. You can't do this. To which I say, it first of all is nothing new to see the Democrat Party have a cozy relationship with the cartels. I mean, you think back to the first Trump term, where Nancy Pelosi and others got really pissed off that Trump referred to MS-13 as animals, and they said, no human being is an animal. You even had some left-wing outlets interviewing MS-13 members and claiming, oh, they're just ordinary kids who ride their bikes to school or some garbage like that. I even go back, for instance, to the Fast and Furious scandal under the Obama administration and say, hey, this has been a long-running trend. And even earlier this year, we saw I kid you not, a CNN interview with a cartel member in Mexico, where they were trying to get the cartel to say something bad about Trump, and it actually backfired in a pretty ridiculous way. Check it out.
According to the Trump administration, you are a terrorist. I mean, the cartels have been labeled a foreign terrorist organization. What do you make of that?
Está fea la situación, ¿verdad? Está fea la situación, pero pues todos tenemos que comer.
What's your message to Donald Trump, if he's watching this?
Mi respeto, él tiene que según él buscar lo mejor para los suyos. Pero el detalle que ya están los consumidores, ¿no? Si no hubiera consumidores, pues...
I mean, typical behavior, and I'm sure you're about to see more of it. Oh, let's interview a literal cartel member and ask if his feelings are hurt by the fact that Trump said bad things. And hilariously, the cartel member, who is basically a hardened criminal, kind of a sociopath, but understands the business that he's in, says, no, actually, the president of the United States should protect his own people. So you have a position where even the Mexican cartel are saying, look, we're doing bad stuff, but this is for our own benefit. America should act in its own benefit as their country and their government. And the Democrats, of course, don't want that to be the case. But in today's video, I want to run you through the apparent military operation that was conducted, as well as react to some of these seethers and doubters who are saying, no, it's actually a really bad thing that you're using the U.S. military to defend the homeland instead of someone else's homeland. So we'll tell you about it. First, though, do us a favor, guys. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. We're only about 5,000 subscribers away from 500K. So help us get there. Hit that red button. And with that said, so let's run you through the timeline here, just so we can understand. Earlier this month, President Trump signed a directive for the Pentagon to use military force against the foreign drug cartels. This was back on August 8th. Of course, also responding to the fact that both Mexico, to some degree, they've been doing some performative stuff, but also not really enough. We'll show you that. But also Venezuela specifically, obviously, have refused to fight the cartels. So Trump indeed decided to take unilateral action. Of course, later on, this is August 15th, about 2 weeks ago, Trump decided he would be deploying 4,000 troops, soldiers, I believe from a combination of like Marines, Coast Guard, Navy here, aboard a flotilla of ships, including the Iwo Jima Amphibious Ready Group 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit, a nuclear-powered attack submarine. And that's what the cartels are needing, right? Multiple P-8 Poseidon reconnaissance aircraft, several destroyers, and a guided missile cruiser to the Caribbean. And this is all, of course, to respond. This is the response, guys, to the drug cartels. And then today we indeed got the announcement. First instance known of this, that the U.S. military conducted a lethal strike against a Venezuelan drug cartel vessel in the Caribbean Ocean, right? So all these warships that have been sent are now hard at work, actually defending America. Take a listen to Trump make that announcement for yourself.
When you come out and when you leave the room, you'll see that we just, over the last few minutes, literally shot out a boat, a drug-carrying boat, a lot of drugs in that boat. And you'll be seeing that, and you'll be reading about that. It just happened moments ago, and our great general, head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who's been so incredible, including what took place in Iran, knocking out potential nuclear power for a long time to come. I think within a month they would have had it if we didn't do what we did. But he gave us a little bit of a briefing. And you'll see. And there's more where that came from. We have a lot of drugs pouring into our country, coming in for a long time. And we just, these came out of Venezuela and coming out very heavily from Venezuela. A lot of things are coming out of Venezuela. So we took it out, and you'll get to see that.
And by the way, Trump has since released a video showing I believe this is a drone strike against this drug boat from Venezuela, as you can see. Not sure if we're allowed to play that on YouTube, so I won't, but you can find this on the internet. And Trump put out the following statement saying, earlier this morning, on my orders, U.S. military forces conducted a kinetic strike against positively identified Tren de Aragua narco-terrorists. Keep that word in mind. We ought to use it more, because that's what a lot of the immigration crisis was really about and who was being sponsored by, right? It's not, refugees, asylum seekers. No, human trafficking and narco-terrorism. That's what's going on at the southern border. Always important to frame the issues in accurate ways, not allow the left to propagandize the use of language. That is what's going on here. In the Southcom area of responsibility, TDA, yes, is a designated foreign terrorist organization operating under the control of Nicolas Maduro, responsible for mass murder, drug trafficking, sex trafficking, and acts of violence and terror in the United States and Western Hemisphere. The strike occurred while the terrorists were at sea in international waters, transporting illegal narcotics heading to the United States. The strike resulted in 11 terrorists killed in action. No U.S. forces were harmed in the strike. Please let this serve as notice to anybody even thinking about bringing drugs into the United States of America. Beware. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Now, here's the thing about this, is that if you watch some of my videos on Ukraine or the Middle East or different issues, you might be surprised by my take, but if it's not clear, I completely support what's going on right now. And why is that, Vince? Why when it comes to military action, like across the ocean and a lot of American intervention, you're really against it, you're really pissed off about it, but when the military is used in America's own hemisphere, you think it's a really good thing? Well, it's very simple. Because I'm not some isolationist who thinks we should never have a military, or we should never use the military. I believe the purpose of military is to defend and keep safe our own homeland, our own country, not someone else's country, our country. And what do you see in the border crisis, right? Because I remember very early on into Trump's presidency, one of the proudest moments I've had as an American citizen in recent memory when it comes to our military, and honestly, a lot of my life, frankly, because all I've grown up in, I was born in 2003, you know what happened that year, is total disaster and embarrassment and just nonsense from the Pentagon, is the fact that Trump deployed 2,000 U.S. troops to our own border, right, to actually secure and keep our own homeland safe. Same situation here, right, because we know the fact that not only do you have a mass migration crisis, you have a drug crisis, right? More Americans are dying to drug overdoses every year than the entire Vietnam War, which is that what? I am actually extremely proud of the fact that for once and finally in my life, U.S. military force is not being used across the ocean. It's being used here to defend an issue and protect American citizens from something that is indeed a direct threat to them. And it's almost baffling to me how people did not think about this before, right? Why is the United States so obsessed with, I don't know, Ukraine, Israel, Gaza, Iraq, Afghanistan, all these places, around the world, when there's serious problems, right? There's like failed states, there's all these issues, of course, in our own hemisphere. I think we are now at the point where the United States, frankly, needs a new Monroe Doctrine. This idea that we keep fighting all this, you look at Russia, what Russia does, you look at what China does, our rivals, right? They're most interested, they have global influence, sure, but they're most interested in the areas close to them. And yet when it comes to Latin America, for instance, Americans think it's crazy that we would intervene militarily to stop an issue that's directly affecting American citizens. No, that's how militaries are supposed to be used, right? The Panama Canal debate that you may remember back from the inauguration period actually directly surrounds the fact that for some odd reason, the United States has been allowing China to basically buy up land and influence around the Panama Canal. And it's like, again, where's our freaking military focus? Eastern Europe? How about the fact that your top rival and adversary is like taking over significant geopolitical control in your own hemisphere, right? Our own hemisphere should come first when it comes to American interests. And obviously things that directly affect American people ought to come first. So that's why I say, right? Again, totally justified here. And frankly, I question as to why sometimes there is not more of this, okay? The CIA, for instance, always is obsessed with overthrowing governments around the world, right? Oh, let's take out Libya. Let's take out Ukraine back in 2014, all this stuff where the average American can't look at it and explain to you how exactly that benefited us. But it's funny because Reagan gets criticized a lot for similar things in the 80s. But why do we not use, for instance, our little color revolutions today to do regime changes in Latin America? Not to support the criminals, but to stop the criminals, right? Like, why is the United States not trying to get Bukele-style leaders installed all across the entire region to basically say, hey, it's in our interest to have these nations stabilized so that they stop bringing us people and stop bringing us drugs and guns and all these other issues, right? Just saying, just some food for thought. So that's why I say, proud patriotic moment to witness all of this. And no, that's not inconsistent with my other views on foreign policy. Because again, my view is that the military should protect our own interests. In the United States, when it comes to this idea of like intervening in the world, you could call it sort of imperialism, whatever it is, our own hemisphere should come first. That should be our top priority to secure. New Monroe Doctrine, that's what it should be, right? So anyways, you can see this as well. And it's worth noting too, that when it comes to Mexico, and there's a lot of criticisms to be made, I don't think they're exactly doing the most they can. We've even recently, in the past month, seen the Mexican military very quietly start to cooperate with Trump. Because publicly, as you may remember, Trump basically made this threat quasi that, well, if you don't get your act together, we might send military troops on the ground, right? We might actually take direct action against the cartel in these other countries. And of course, the Mexican president infamously said, no, we're never going to allow that. We're never going to accept U.S. troops on our soil. And it was this big grandstanding moment. The Democrats are cheering her on. But very quietly, what did that pressure campaign achieve? It achieved actually some degree, at least a little bit, of Mexican military operation against the cartel as well. Earlier this month, we saw a Mexican Navy ship take out 900 kilos of cocaine that were seized off the coast of Guerrero here. That is 46 tons of cocaine so far that have been seized by the Mexican Navy. So I'm not saying they can't do more, but again, interesting to see, right? That's what's you see going on. As well as that, caving to President Trump earlier this month, we saw Mexico expel 26 high-ranking wanted cartel members. They were extradited to the United States. Now, it's a known thing for a long time that the Mexican government is in bed with the cartels, protecting the cartels. But in this case, the Trump campaign basically said here, no, that's not, of course, going to happen. And that's coming why? Because we threatened Mexico saying, hey, get your act together, or we might have to, do a DC federal takeover in Mexico City. No, that's just a joke. But there was a strategy right behind all of this talk. And now, of course, as you may have seen earlier this week, it's starting to become a legitimate question as to whether there should be U.S. military intervention to take out the cartels in the nation of Mexico. And Mexican senators infamously got in a big fight about it. So it's actually a legitimate idea that they're debating right now in their country. And I guess this is what they call debate, but check it out. Yeah, so let me explain what you're seeing there. You're seeing members of the Mexican government who are owned by the cartel, maybe some who are not as owned by the cartel or not at all owned by the cartel, basically screaming at each other. And, well, that's, of course, the situation. And yes, indeed, it is well established that Mexico President Claudia Sheinbaum and her allies and her party are bought and paid for by the cartels. Again, that's why I say, okay, CIA, hey, looking at you, right? You do all these coups, you do all these color revolutions, these quiet interventions, these subversion campaigns, right? And your related arm USAID doesn't exist anymore, but you guys still have these capacities. Let's be honest here. Why are you trying to coup all these random places that have nothing to do with us, but the nation south of our border, where the foreign terrorist organization that is flooding like mass death into our country has a political system that is entirely owned by them? Why do we not quietly seek for regime change in Mexico, CIA? Can I just ask that question? Because that seems to me like something that would actually legitimately benefit the United States, to change the government, change the regime in Mexico and try to clean things up, right? But of course, we know the answer is because all of these entities, whether that's the Pentagon and, you know, their control of the military, or the CIA or USAID, all of these things, the status quo and how they've been used since the end of the Cold War has been not at all in America's actual interests. It's just detrimental to America's interests. And that's not what they're not concerned about the Americans actually being affected by the violence and the drugs in this country. They're concerned about, I don't know, who knows, right? But you know the answer. That's exactly what is going on here. Of course, this similarly comes at the same time that this kind of big pressure campaign is being taken against Latin America and Latin American leaders, as well as drug organizations, because we also got the news earlier this month, you may have heard, that the Trump administration has put a $50 million bounty on the president, dictator, whatever you want to call him, of Venezuela, that being, of course, Nicolas Maduro. And so, obviously, right, Tren de Aragua is a Venezuelan cartel. There's a connection here. We'll explain that for you in a second, but first, take a listen to that announcement.
The 3 U.S. warships that are being sent to Venezuela, and there's 4,000 Marines on board. Are you looking at possibility of boots on the ground there?
What I will say with respect to Venezuela, President Trump has been very clear and consistent. He's prepared to use every element of American power to stop drugs from flooding into our country and to bring those responsible to justice. The Maduro regime is not the legitimate government of Venezuela. It is a narco-terror cartel. In Maduro, it is the view of this administration, is not a legitimate president. He is a fugitive head of this cartel who has been indicted in the United States for trafficking drugs into the country.
Right. And again, same question, because on the surface, you know, you hear them, oh, they're going after Maduro, all this stuff. You know, the United States government, even pre-Trump, was kind of anti-Maduro. It sounds like more neocon regime change garbage, but it's not. And let me again here explain why. Is because, you know, I don't necessarily care that Maduro is a socialist. That's not the reason I want to topple him. I don't believe that, oh, because I disagree with the government's ideology or rule of leadership, you know, that should be the case. But what is true, and what is of direct interest right now to the United States, is that when you look at the border crisis and the fact that, as Trump often points out, and is true, Maduro basically emptied his prisons and intentionally sent all of his criminals over the southern border here into the United States. As they point out, by the way, it's a narco-terrorist state because the Maduro government and Tren de Aragua are working very closely in the actual invasion of America, both by drugs and by criminals, right? Then the way I see it, you know, I'm not supporting a full-on Iraq war invasion of Venezuela, but there ought to be pressure, and it ought to be like stated, no, it is in America's legitimate interest. I can fully justify why we ought to start taking action against this stuff, right? Whether it's, you know, sending the Navy to stop Tren de Aragua, all this stuff, and obviously designating them a foreign terrorist organization here so we can deport them. Because again, this is a situation where you have a government that's actively, directly harming the citizens of this nation by sponsoring the border invasion. And that's what they've done. Again, keep that in mind. Oh, and by the way, if I forgot to mention, not only is the Venezuelan government actively sponsoring the foreign invasion of our country, but they're refusing to take back the deportations, right? When we try to deport Venezuelan citizens, their own citizens, back to their own countries, what is Venezuela doing? Refusing to repatriate literally their own people, their own citizens, which is a blatant violation of international law if we want to get into that whole debate. I mean, I know it doesn't mean much, but, if we want to go there, right? So they're invading our country. They refuse to take these people back. And you're wondering why there's this pressure campaign being put on them. In my eyes, it's completely justified.
Venezuela has stopped accepting deportation flights from the U.S. and Mexico after a deal between the nations fell apart. Those flights had been seen as a successful way to try to stem the flow of migrants from Venezuela. Correspondent Allie Bradley is live along the Arizona border with some details, Allie.
That border battle once again heating up here. We just got our hands on some new migrant encounter numbers from our CBP sources that confirm that we are on track to beat last February's encounter numbers. We've already seen nearly 140,000 people enter the country, and that's with 6 days left to go, and that includes Venezuelan migrants as well. Here now, News Nation was able to confirm here with ICE sources that they are in fact stopping these removal flights. So these removal flights are supposed to send illegal immigrants with a final order of removal back to Venezuela. They have, again, been rejected from the Venezuelan government.
But of course, you're seeing the responses, and some characters are not happy. Some are really upset and pissed off that, oh, how dare you use the U.S. military for an actual good cause for once. And you see an article like this, for instance, out of Responsible Statecraft saying, cartels are bad, but they're not terrorists. This is mission creep. Goes on to state, Trump and numerous Republicans now in the admin have spoken eagerly about using the military to go after cartels. But even Trump did not take using special forces off the table. And they essentially go into this long thing about how, oh, that's such a bad idea. I saw another article today say that, oh, we were going to get stuck in a forever war if we go to war with the cartels. To which I say, what do you mean forever war? Like the one you guys fought in Afghanistan, or the one in Iraq, or the one in Libya, right? Syria, everywhere in the freaking world. Lots of forever wars I can think of the United States has fought. You know the difference? The difference is this quote unquote forever war, if that's what it was, would actually be one that's beneficial to the United States and the American people, right? You could say, for instance, we're fighting a forever war against drugs or crime in this country, because that's what the police are sort of doing on the streets. But again, there is a justification to do that because you actually want to have safe cities and communities in this country, right? Whereas the forever war in Iraq, what did that do for the average American? What did that do to better the livelihood of any American citizen? No answer, obviously. We see another one here out of this lady, Medea Benjamin, who is the co-founder of Code Pink, which is like this feminist peace organization, hippie, whatever, making this whole video about it. So let's break down her arguments, and I'll show you apparently why liberals think it's a really bad idea to use military force against cartels. All right.
This is an important announcement. The U.S. government is sending warships, Marines, and spy planes to the Caribbean to counter narco-trafficking. Ah, yes, because nothing solves drug addiction like guided missiles, treatment programs, economic development. No, warships. This is about democracy in the region. Maduro is a dictator. Democracy? The kind where you strangle a country with sanctions so hospitals can't get medicine, then slap a $50 million bounty on their president's head like it's the Wild Wild West? That kind of democracy?
Well, again, my argument about Venezuela has nothing to do with democracy. I really don't care if other countries choose to embrace democracy or not. Nation building, I'd probably agree with this woman. You look at a place like Afghanistan, is a failed experiment. I'm not advocating for regime change because of democracy. What I'm saying is it's an objective fact. The Maduro regime is causing problems for the United States and our people because they're sponsoring the border invasion of our country, right? The government is actively allowing and encouraging drug trafficking into our country, okay? That's the problem. It has nothing to do with freaking democracy, as if you guys, so you guys suddenly care about democracy now, right? Ukraine, I don't know, but whatever, right? That's number one. Number two, of course, some issues are not completely one-sided, right? Yes, is it true that we need drug treatment and rehab and all that stuff? Yes. By the way, it's accessible in the United States. People act like it doesn't exist. But also, number two, you also have to cut off the source of the drugs. or at least make it harder for people to get their hands on it. They go hand in hand, actually, right? This left-wing myth that like, oh, we're just prosecuting and jailing people for using drugs. No, that's not true, right? That's not what's happening. No, we're trying to go after the suppliers. And by the way, that's the way it's really always been. It's this left-wing myth that like, oh, you know, all these people are getting arrested because they have a drug addiction. No. It's usually they're arrested in connection to something caused by their drug addiction, not the drug addiction. But anyways, let's keep listening.
For context, U.S. sanctions have cut Venezuela off from billions in oil revenue, causing medicine shortages, hospital closures, power outages, food insecurity. A 2025 Lancet Global Health study found unilateral sanctions kill over 500,000 civilians every year, more lives lost than battle-related casualties in wars. That's collective punishment. We need...
So, let's get this straight. You have a socialist country who is also an oil-rich country. Now, I was told that socialism is good and oil is bad. Yet they're mad at the United States for refusing to do trade with this socialist country, specifically their trade of oil, right? Which is, you know, super bad for the environment. We shouldn't have oil. And they're now turning around and saying the United States is evil for not buying oil as a capitalist country from the socialist country. And the reason why the socialist country is struggling, it's not because of the fact that they're like a failed state and super corrupt and their economic approach is terrible and the nationalization of the oil industry was a massive disaster in Venezuela. No. This socialist nation is failing, this poor socialist country, because the capitalist country refuses to do capitalist trade with them over fossil fuels. Great argument, guys. Great argument these people are making. Okay.
To show strength. Regional security depends on it. Oh, totally. Because nothing says security like parking destroyers off someone's coastline. Very neighborly. I'm sure Venezuela feels so safe right now.
That does scream security, actually. I don't even see the problem with that. Yes, we should park destroyers off the coastline. Again, it's not about regime changing against Maduro. It's about stop sending people and drugs to our country. Then you can do whatever you want. It's not my business, not my country. Okay, but, you know, they have an agenda here in, you know, clearly doing that. But anyways, you basically get the point. Okay, so they're just saying all this garbage, right? And you're going to see another Kilmar Bergo Garcia situation, I'm sure. You know, they're going to say that, oh, you know, these Tren de Aragua people on the boat that you blew up, they didn't receive due process. That's coming. I'm telling you, it's coming, right? But anyways, with that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. What do you think of the decision, of course, to use a military force against the cartels? Let me know. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.